Engaging action-based combat has been a staple of the gacha genre for years. Incredible animations, beautiful combos, and unique gameplay across characters is what drives player engagement and the willingness to spend money. But there's one part of combat that few games in the genre have dared to implement fully, and that's the Z-axis, or aerial combat. Many games have some implementation of aerial combat, but oftentimes it's limited to just one or two characters on the roster, or comes paired with a very shallow moveset that isn't very innovative at all. There's a reason for that. Balancing a game around a whole new direction of movement and attacks can be tricky, and that means aerial combat is usually a gimmick or completely overpowered. Other games take aerial combat to the next level, adding even more depth onto their already intricate combat systems with built-in trade-offs to create one of the most unique experiences in not just gacha gaming, but gaming as a whole. Wuthering Waves is one of those games, and the innovative approach that they've taken to aerial combat is nothing short of amazing. Today we'll be breaking down why this is the case, diving into how Wuthering Waves utilizes aerial combat so well, and why it feels fantastically balanced, and how it adds even more depth to a game that is already filled with nuanced mechanics. As always, if you're enjoying this content, please hit that like and subscribe button. One of the biggest struggles with aerial combat is making it meaningful to use. Across the gacha genre, it's common for characters to stick to set rotations and abilities that inflict the most damage possible in the least amount of time possible. What this means is that some moves in a character's kit aren't worth using at all due to a DPS loss somewhere else. Why use attacks that do less damage or have less effects? Wuthering Waves added depth to their aerial combat through something incredibly smart: trade-offs. Many of the aerial combos in Wuthering Waves do less damage than ground combos, but they're oftentimes much faster to execute or have other advantages built in. It's a mechanic that we've seen built into a ton of character kits, with Verina's increased concerto energy generation and forte consumption when using her aerial attacks, and Chang Li's shortened rotations when activating her special true sight attacks in the air. Utilizing these faster attacks is oftentimes an optimal way to play these characters, even if they're sacrificing their damage. However, this creates another problem. Why would you use any other attacks on these characters? Kuro avoided this situation by adding even more trade-offs for this additional versatility. Characters with air combos oftentimes need to charge up some resource through actions on the ground or other means, like intro skills. This just adds more variety to their gameplay. On the other hand, echo skills, which provide some of the most powerful buffs in the game, typically cannot be activated in the air, aside from a few outliers like Jue. There's also a lot more risk and actually a lot less survivability involved when performing these moves. They accomplish this through the dodge system. On the ground, characters can dodge in very quick succession, and with proper timing, evade every attack that an enemy makes. In the air, characters can only perform one singular dodge until they touch the ground. What this means is that characters can't spend the entire fight in the air unless they enjoy tanking hits from enemies. And when bosses and endgame content can effectively two-shot build characters, this is a rough approach. It's also common knowledge that the higher you are, the harder you fall. And getting hit out of the air means it takes a lot longer to recover and get back into the fight. With time-sensitive content like the Tower of Adversity, this is just another risk that you're taking that can prevent you from reaching that 3-star clear. What this means is that even characters like Jin C, who have unique mechanics like air dodging, still have to be played well with recognition of boss patterns to avoid the huge time sink of tanking hits during her burst windows. Aerial moves allow you to avoid a lot of potential attacks in an enemy's moveset, but oftentimes they can expose you to other ones. And all this does is add even more depth to a combat system rich with mechanics. Aerial combos are a fantastic tool, but they had to be used at the right moments for the rewards to outweigh the risks. However, the opposite can take place as well. Jeja, the newest limited character, has some of the best mobility in the game, with the ability to zip around the battlefield through her Forte circuit and resonance skill casts. Instead of shortening her rotations, she can instead extend them by jumping before her combo or holding her resonance skill to turn that horizontal mobility into vertical mobility. This is just another situation where Kuro has given players options. At the end of the day, aerial attacks are a fantastic mechanic built into a lot of characters' baseline rotations, but they're also implemented in a fantastic way through other elements in character kits, namely their intro skills and resonance liberations. A lot of intro skills across the roster will cause the character to enter the battlefield in the air. While this can seem disorienting or even unhelpful at first, as players might not be able to activate their echo skills or begin their ground combos, this kind of entrance actually has a lot of advantages. It can either put you out of reach of enemy attacks, or even close the distance between your character and high mobility bosses. Almost all of these characters can typically follow up with a resonance liberation that can be cast in the air that immediately puts them on the ground. While this kind of system can appear a bit restricting at first, what this ultimately does is actually promote optimal rotations across your team that weave echo skills and character abilities across your setup, rather than pressing a set order of buttons across each teammate. Your optimal rotations will vary depending on the situation, and the definition of one heavily relies on the actions that an enemy is taking. That's what you call depth in combat. There's an optimal goal, but the path to that goal is almost always varied, and that makes every combat encounter feel fresh. However, it's also fair to say that this increased depth is only available for the most recent additions to the roster. There are some parts of aerial combat that can seem undeniably lacking, and that extends to a fair percentage of the roster. Many of the 1.0 characters have uninspired aerial moves that either consist of a single plunging attack or pea-shooter shots from a pistol. This isn't really a problem though. Aerial combat is not for everyone. With more dramatic camera panning, increased risk from hits, and additional restrictions on dodging, some players simply don't want to deal with those additional complications in a game as fast-paced and intensive as Wuthering Waves. And that's fine. What Kuro is doing is providing variety and options for how players want to approach combat. Flashy movesets and intricate combos can be a great selling point, but many players are perfectly happy with simple, down-to-earth mechanics that aren't difficult to master. As long as there's player engagement, that's what matters. As always, if you enjoyed this content, please hit that like and subscribe button. Peace out.